Hi, my name is Cheryl and I am a crafty little chickie. Today I am going to be giving you a tutorial on making this blanket. It is a baby shell stitch blanket. This is not necessarily my pattern. There's so many different shell patterns for blankets. I went through multiple patterns trying to decide what pattern worked most for me. And then I just kind of went from there and made it up as I went along. So it may be someone's pattern. It may be something different, that I don't know, but I will show you what it is. I just don't want to claim this pattern necessarily as my own because it might not be. So with that being said, I've done it in 3 colors. The first part I did in this green, forest green, and then I went to a lighter blue, and then I went to a darker blue. This is the top of the blanket. It's hard to show it all in one picture, but at the end I will give a picture of what the blanket looks like. It's actually part of the rest of my pattern, which is called Counting Sheep Shell Stitch Baby Blanket. This is supposed to be the field on the bottom here. This is the bottom part of the blanket. This is the green field, and then it goes up to the light blue sky, and then it goes into a little bit of a darker sky as the sun is setting. That's my idea of what I was going for. There will be sheep jumping fences on the green part or grass part of the blanket, and that's another tutorial, several different tutorials. The numbers are each separate and the sheep are separate tutorials, but they are all labeled as Counting Sheep Shell Stitch Baby Blanket. So yeah, there's multiple tutorials to go for creating this item to completion. Starting from the blanket to the numbers, the fences, and the sheep. Alright, so I will show you how I made this blanket, and I'll show you the yarn and the tools I use in this tutorial. Here are the yarn colors that I used to create this tutorial, to create this blanket. The first one is green. I have had this one in my yarn stash, I think, since I was a teenager. And I have no idea where I got it or if someone gave it to me. It's part of another blanket that I had made. It was my very first crochet blanket, which happened to be a shell stitch queen size blanket. A little bit adventurous, but it worked out well and I actually still have it. So, but that's where that comes from. This is green. I'm assuming it's a red heart. It is about its worsted weight. It's slightly thinner than the rest of the yarn, but not by much. So that I used for the first part of the blanket, the grass area. The first part of the sky, I used this blue Red Heart Comfort yarn. There is the information on the back of the label if you want to use that. The darker blue, I didn't have a full roll of it, and I misplaced the label, but it is also Red Heart Comfort yarn. I just don't have the color number or the name of the color for this yarn, but it is a beautiful, beautiful yarn color. But it's just slightly darker blue than that one. And then for the trim around the edge of the blanket, I used Red Heart Comfort yarn in black. Okay, so the tools you're going to need for this project are going to be a crochet hook. I used a 5mm or the letter H hook, and I used scissors to cut off my ends, and in the end, to trim in all my tails, I used a yarn needle. Okay, so we're going to get started making the shell stitch baby blanket. As you can tell, I've got my green yarn out. I'm going to stitch onto the hook, or stitch onto the hook. All I do is I wrap around my pointer finger twice, top over bottom until it goes over the edge of the finger, slip on to the hook and tighten. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing 120 chains onto this loop. So we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, Okay, so we're going to continue doing chains like that until we've done 120 chains, at which point I'll meet up with you again. Okay, so I have completed 120 chains. This is going to be the basis for your entire first row. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually technically going to start the next row by adding 2 more chains. So total is 122, but these 2 chains count towards the next row. And then we're going to single crochet in the second chain from the hook, not counting the one on your loop. So 1 single crochet in that second chain from the hook. And then we're going to skip 2 stitches. We're going to skip this one, and we're going to go into this one. We're going to put 5 double crochets into that third chain. 2, 3, 4, and 5. The first row is always a little bit awkward to get into the chains, especially if you're doing multiple in one chain. Okay, so we've done the 5 chains, and then we're going to skip 2, and we're going to put a single crochet in the third one. Okay, so then we are going to skip the next 2 again, and in the third one we're going to put 5 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so then we are going to skip the next 2 chains, and in the third one do a single crochet. So you're probably seeing the pattern come in already. You're doing the shell stitch and single crochets, and each of those stitches are always separated by skipping 2 chains. Alright, so you can continue that pattern right through to the end. Like we'll do the 5, we'll skip 2 stitches, do the 5 double crochet in the third stitch, skip 2 stitches, and then do a single crochet, and continue that until the end, and at that point I'll meet up with you. Okay, so I'm coming close to the end here of doing my first row onto the chains. I've just done the single crochet here. So I'm going to skip these 2, and I'm going to do a double crochet in the third, and I'm going to do that 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so then what we need to do is we need to do 1 single crochet, and it happens to be that it is the very last chain. So then you know that your counting has worked. So you do 1 single crochet into this very last chain, and you are done with your first row. Okay, so to start the second row, the only thing different really from one row to the next is how it ends and how it begins, because sometimes you'll start with a half shell and sometimes you'll start with a single crochet. And the reason, the way you know that is that each shell for the next row, there will be a shell here. So we'll start with a half shell, and there'll be a shell here. It'll be in between, on top of each shell, right? So there'll be a single crochet on the top of each shell, and then in between each shell you're going to have another shell. That's where they alternate. So since we ended with a single crochet, we know that on top of it should be a shell. But you can't have a whole shell, otherwise it's going to stick out and your blanket's going to turn wonky very quick. So you just do a half shell. And you say, what is half of 5? Well, technically we say 3. Even though it's not really true, right? It's not technically 3, but for this blanket purposes, we will be. So to start this, we will chain 3, and then you turn your work. So you're facing the back side of your blanket. So far that you've made, you're seeing all the back sides of the shells that you just made. The reason why we did chain 3 is because that's going to take the place of the first double crochet. So since I said there's going to be 3 double crochets in a half shell, we've technically done 1 because this double crochet, or these 3 chains, is taking the place of 1 double crochet. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into that single crochet, this hole right here, right there. So we're going to do double crochet, yarn over, go right through there, and do 1 more, just in that same stitch. So that is your half shell that you're going to start with. And then the next one you're going to do is you're going to go through to the middle stitch, which is 1, 2, 3 stitches in, and you're going to go through that top shell and single crochet. Okay, so then you're going to go over to the single crochet that you did below in the previous round, right here. And you're going to do your shell, your 5 double crochets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, all into that same single crochet from the previous row. Okay, so then again you're going to do a single crochet, and you're going to do it into the 3rd stitch of the shell. Okay, so you can kind of see the first couple rows are very difficult to see how a blanket looks because it kind of doesn't want to set its shape until you've gone at least 5 or 6 rows in, right? But you can see that we've done the single crochet at the end here, and then here is the half shell, the 1, 2, 3 that we did. So it's a very tight pattern in regards to having one shell kind of right next to each other, like they alternate here. Some patterns have like single crochets in between each shell and each single crochet. Or sorry, they have chains in between each single crochet and each shell. If that's what you're looking for, it just adds a little bit more space between the stitches. But I was looking for something that was a little bit more of a solid blanket. All right. So this one we ended here on a single crochet. On top of the shell, you're always going to have a single crochet, and in the single crochet from the previous row, you're always going to have a shell. That's just the way it goes. So we've just finished the single crochet on top of the shell. So now we're going to go into this single crochet from the previous round, or the previous row, and we're going to do our shell. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we're going to look for the 3rd stitch of the shell. 1st, 2nd, and 3rd stitch. So you're going to continue that pattern all the way around. You're going to put your shell into the single stitch, the 5 double crochets, and you're going to put a single crochet on the 3rd stitch of each shell. So you continue that pattern right until the end of the row, and that's where I will meet up with you. Okay, so we're almost at the end of row 2 here. I finished the single crochet on top of the previous row's shell, and now I'm going to do a shell in the single crochet from the row below. So I'm going to do 5 double crochets into that single crochet in the row below. 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then in the 3rd stitch of the shell, do a single crochet. Some would kind of wonder what to do at this point. They would look at it and go, oh, how do I make sure the blanket goes up here? If you remember, we started with a single crochet. We did the 120 crochets, and then we did 2 additional, and then we went and put a single crochet. So that's what we're looking for now. You'll see it's right above where that chain has been stretched out. You know you put your single crochet in there. So you want to yarn over, and here you can see the V. I'm not sure if the dark green yarn will show it, but you want to go through the 2 stitches. That's 1, and that's the 2nd one right there. And you do your double crochet, and once you've done 1, then you can see it clearly, or at least a lot more clearly. And we're going to be putting 3 double crochets into that stitch. 2 and 3, and we only need 3 because we are doing a half shell there. So if you look at it, like I said earlier, it never shows what it's supposed to in the first couple rows because the chain always kind of warps it for the first little bit. But you'll see here that the blanket is going up from this point right here. Okay, so row 2 and row 3 are going to be the rows that you're going to repeat for the remainder of the blanket. I did 127 rows, and you wonder why it's an odd number. You can do 128. I was going for a certain measurement for my blanket, and that's just how I ended it. But you can make it as wide as you want. Just make sure it's always divisible by 6, because you always need to make sure you've got your single crochet that you have on this end and here like this, right? So if you've got your 2 in row 2, you've always got the half shells. You always want to make sure that's that way. And if you do divisible by 6, you can add 2 at the end, whatever number you work on. If you want to make it wider, you can make it more than 120 chains. Just make sure it's always divisible by 6. And then once you've finished that chain, then you add the 2, because that's what you're going to be using for the start of row 2, because that's your single crochet. Okay, so now that that's clear as mud, we are going to go ahead and start with row 2 next, or sorry, row 3 next. Okay, so this is the end of row 2. We are going to put our hook back into the loop, and we are going to do 1 chain, and then we're going to turn our work. So we're looking at the back of the row that we just did. Okay. And then after that 1 chain that we just did, we're going to single crochet into the top of that last one here. That last double crochet here. 1 single crochet. Just like you would single crochet on the top of any of the shells, you're still going to have to single crochet on the top of the half shell. Okay. So then you look for your single crochet here. And since you did 1 single crochet on the beginning of this row, you know you're going to have to do a shell next, right? So those shells never change other than being halves on the ends, right? So you have to do 5 double crochets. 3, 4, and 5. And then in the 3rd chain, or the 3rd stitch of the shell, 1, 2, 3, you do a single crochet. Okay, so then you look for your single crochet in the row below. You can see it was just above this shell right here, and on top of it you did a single crochet, right? So just beside that, there's your stitch. That's where you're going to put a shell in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the 1, 2, 3rd stitch on the shell, you do a single crochet. Okay, so that is going to be the pattern for this row. It's the same as the other ones, it's just different on how you end and how you start your rows. And like I said, that remains the same. You just repeat row 2 and 3, 2 and 3, 2 and 3 until you're done. But I will meet up with you at the end of row 3 here, and I'll show you how to end this row. Okay, so I'm almost at the end of row 3 here. I've just done a shell. So then in the 3rd stitch of the shell below, I'm going to be doing a single crochet. And then in between here is my single crochet from the row before, which I'm going to add a shell into, which is 5 double crochets. This is 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so then you know you need to do a single crochet into this half shell here. But what may confuse some people is this, remember we did 3 chains here, and then we did the 2 double crochets? This chain of 3 acted as your first double crochet. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to, some people just single crochet into the 2 stitches between, or you can single crochet into that 3rd chain. I like doing that because it just keeps its shape a little bit more. So into that 3rd chain from your row below, you put a single crochet. Okay, so then you have finished up to the 3rd row. And the more you go along, the more these ends will straighten out. These shells, they naturally tend to warp the chain below. It doesn't really have anything to anchor it down to keep it from warping at first until you move further on and the weight of the blanket itself straightens it out. Okay, so like I said before, I did 127 of these rows. You can do as many rows as you want, and also, as I mentioned before, you can make the blanket wider. It is going to turn out to be wider than what it looks to be here, just because as the blanket continues to be made, it does kind of stretch out a little bit. And also when you block it, you can stretch it out a little bit further even if you want. But this is a baby crib blanket, so with this width plus the border, that's what I was going for. So whatever width you want to, just make sure you make it divisible by 6 in your original chain. And then at the end of that amount, you can always add 2 to start your 2nd round, and you can go back to your, you can always add 2 for your 1st row to start. And just make sure you go back to that part of the tutorial, and you will be fine. Okay, so now you know how to do this blanket. For me, I was going for the plan of the counting sheep as the theme of this blanket, so this was done for the 1st third of the blanket in the green here. And then for the 2nd third of the blanket, I did a lighter blue. And then for the last third of the blanket, I did in a darker blue, just so that it's kind of the sky is getting darker. It's towards the end of the day. And these sheep are jumping over these fences, and it's the idea of counting sheep to fall asleep. All right, so you can continue on with this pattern until you get to the height that you want. And then in order to do the border, I have already done the border on the blanket here. This is just a sample blanket, which I'm not going to finish 2 whole blankets like this. This was just to show you how to start the blanket. I will put the pattern for how I did the border. I'll put it in the description below in this tutorial, and you'll be able to follow that pattern, or you can make your own. There's so many different patterns out there. There's a bunch of YouTube videos just on blanket borders. So yeah, you can choose whichever you want, and if you would like to copy the style of the border that I used for my blanket, which is this here. That's the border that I used. I still have to block this blanket, but it's, you can see the holes and then the solid line. I will, if you want to follow that one, then I will put that part of the pattern in the description below. Okay, so here's the blanket. Turned out to be a little bit bigger than I was thinking it would be. And I also put stars on the top part there. Okay, so here's a little bit of an overview, a little bit closer than the previous shot of what the blanket looks like. I love how the sheep are jumping over the fences. I think that's so cute. The only thing I would have done is I would have done this part in a lighter green, just so that the fences and the legs and the faces or the snouts of the sheep would show up a little bit more. That's what I would do differently. And then of course there's the trim that I didn't show in the video, but I will write down the pattern for that in the description. And then the middle bit is the blue sky as it's fading into night. And then the top part is where night is starting to set and the stars are starting to come out. I have a small star and a large star. Both of these patterns are on my channel as well, called Small Star and Large Star. Their link to their pattern will also be in the description below this video. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any comments or suggestions, I'd be happy to hear them in the comments field below. Alright, thanks so much for watching this, and I would like it if you could give it a thumbs up, and even more if you could subscribe to my channel for future videos. Thanks.